Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello again, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Today is Season 6, Episode 2. We're talking linebackers. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is Austin Davidson, my co-host. Welcome back to the show, Austin.
Hello, great to be back.
All right, so as mentioned in the episode's title, we're talking linebackers ahead of the NFL draft for 2021. And also we're talking about NFL free agency from the Steelers' perspective with the free agency legal tampering period and the official start of the new league year occurring this week. There's been a lot of players moving and a lot of players staying put, and there's a lot to get to. We'll be recording our next episode tomorrow night. It's currently late on Friday night. We'll be recording our next podcast and discussing more about general free agency news in that episode. But for this one, we're going to be talking about mostly the Steelers' free agency news. So with that, Austin, why don't we get right into that? And we'll start about the news that happened today. Kind of wild, two major news stories regarding the Steelers, and they both went in completely different directions. Starting first with Steven Nelson, the fact that he had been given permission by the team to seek out a trade. Nelson, only 28 years old, having spent the last 2 years with the team, a really good player. This was certainly a surprise. And then the second move of the day, the Steelers re-signed free agent wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster to I believe it was a 1-year, $8 million deal with several voidable years to help lower the cap hit to only $2 million because the Steelers were going to have a lot of trouble fitting in a 1-year deal on their cap. So of those two different signings, which one kind of floored you more?
Honestly, it was really confusing with the Steven Nelson stuff. Like, it just came out of left field. Everything felt okay, and it was just like the Steelers were having a pretty decent free agency for their standards. Like, we were expecting a lot of these guys to go elsewhere, but then it was just like, oh, yes, Steelers have given permission to Steven Nelson to seek trade from nowhere. We had never heard that Steven Nelson was mad. We had never heard anything. And the speculation was that it was because Juju was getting a new contract, but like that's not believed anymore because of the way the void years work. Juju's cap hit is so low that it doesn't really impact keeping Steven Nelson. Supposedly, the reason why Steven Nelson is seeking a trade is because he asked for an extension with the Steelers and wanted more money. Understandably, he's only due $8.25 million this year, which is really cheap, and I think he's worth about 12 to 13 for how he's played. And the Steelers were like, no, and then said, go get an extension somewhere else. Go find it. And I find that to be ridiculous. But so that, to me, was more shocking. And it does kind of suck because the Juju signing is sneakily really good. It is really, really good compared to the other wide receivers that signed. And, I mean, he turned down a better chance, I believe, at a championship to come here and then also turned down more money elsewhere. And also turned down a multi-year deal. Even though the multi-year deal, we don't really know that what came from the Eagles. People have said that, but I don't know how much basis there was behind that. But yeah, to answer the question, the Nelson news was a bigger deal to me.
Okay, so let's talk about this. The Steelers were looking to see if they could find a way to get Smith-Schuster in under the cap, and Nelson wanted an extension. By all accounts, I think he's earned an extension. And if we're talking about jettisoning one of the two starting cornerbacks, the difference between a guy like Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson, if the Steelers had instead done this with Hayden, the Steelers would be only saving, I think it was like $1.5 million less on the salary cap, something along those lines. And then for better or for worse, I think the Steelers like what he brings to the locker room. So in a choice between Nelson and Hayden, I think that there's a good argument to be made that Nelson is already the better player and provides more to the team than a guy like Joe Hayden, even with everything he's done for the team over his Steelers tenure. I really got to be honest, I don't understand the move there. If I had to pick between one or the other, I'd have picked to keep Nelson.
I agree wholeheartedly. No offense to Joe Hayden. I think he's a good player, but basically what came out is that it was between Hayden and Nelson, and they picked Nelson because it saved them more money. But it just makes more sense. Nelson could be a player for you in the future still, where Hayden, it's like you're going year to year. You don't know when he's going to start coming down. Cornerbacks don't typically last very long. I mean, there's like a few outliers, like Captain Munnerlyn, who was ridiculous because he was short and then also lasted into his 40s. But, like, it doesn't happen all the time. It's just we could go into this year and Joe Hayden sucks, and then the Steelers are going to really hate their decision, what they did. I hope not, and I don't think so. I think Joe Hayden is still a good enough player where that's not going to happen, but it happens randomly. You go into every year, and there's always a guy that comes out of nowhere, and then there's a guy that also sucks when you had higher expectations for him. It's just how the NFL works. So you don't know. And Steven Nelson gives you the better chance to be good going forward and into the future because he has a longer timetable. So that's disappointing. And then on top of it, the speculation so far is the highest the Steelers get for Nelson is a third rounder. And that's awful. When this news first broke, it's like, I don't even want a first rounder for him. And now it's like, Steelers are realistically looking at being lucky to get a fifth rounder for him, is what some people are reporting. And so this is just going to suck all around. Steven Nelson is worth way more to the Steelers than a fifth rounder. He is worth more than a first rounder because it's gambling. You go into the draft and you can get anything. You might get a Steven Nelson. And it's just, that's what sucks about it. And if it's true that we will be lucky to get a fifth rounder, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt a lot. You know?
Yeah, well, there's still a good chance that he could be straight up cut. Now, I think he will end up getting traded because we just saw Ryan Finley was going to get cut, and then a team traded for Ryan Finley. So I'm going to believe that the Steelers will be able to trade him, but it's not inconceivable that he won't be either.
Well, to be fair, I think Bill O'Brien snuck back into the office, got on the computer, and said, "Hi, I'm Nick Caserio, and I would like to trade for Ryan Finley." And then they kicked him out and said, "Get out of here." But they said, "Oh, damn it, the trade already went through."
And
same old Texans.
Same old Texans. And regarding the move, I think we both have a general, kind of the same sort of thoughts on it, but I wanted to get into kind of maybe the devil's advocate kind of view here, and that's that adding to the Steelers' offense is more important because if you believe in analytics, it tells you that offense is more stable and defenses tend to be unstable. A year-to-year defense is not going to be the thing that pushes a team over the top, given the way that this game has changed over the past 2 decades to become much more of an offensive game, the NFL is. So it's more worth it to invest in your offense like the Chiefs have and just not worry as much about your defense and just make sure it's passable enough to help you when you need it and do most of the heavy lifting through the offense. Now, you can absolutely disagree with that, but I think that that's one thing people could point to and say, well, now the Steelers have solidified their receiver room and they've got their starting tight end. They just need a number 2 tight end. They need to get a running back, and they can upgrade the offensive line. But they can do a lot of that through the draft and through cheap free agency. So now the offense is a lot closer to where you want it to be going into next year. So maybe that's more valuable, even if it costs doing a little bit of damage to your defense. So I don't know what you think about that, but that's kind of my playing devil's advocate for that.
I agree with that sentiment. I feel like it's unrelated in this case because I still feel like these two things happened so close together. But after seeing Juju Smith-Schuster's deal, I have to feel like these are unrelated. Juju's cap hit is less than $2 million for this year with avoidable years. It doesn't seem like one is because of the other, even though it did at the time because Steven Nelson is due $8.25 million, and then the contract came in at $8 million. But this didn't even put the Steelers under the salary cap, the Juju signing. So it just kind of seems like separate issues. Like, I feel like Nelson could have existed with Juju Smith-Schuster contract with how it happened. I just think that it's just bizarre that a coincidence that these two things happened at the same time.
Okay, well, let me ask you something else then that I don't think has been asked yet. What if the Steelers just don't trade him and they don't release him? What if they just keep him under contract?
I think that would be fantastic, honestly, just to let him play out his final year and then let him sign wherever he wants next year. But I don't know. It seems like that probably put a rift. There's like a rift there already. I feel like it pissed him off when the Steelers said, no, we're not going to give you a extension right now. I don't know. If Nelson's down for it, I'm down for the one last ride with Nelson because I think he's a really good player. And if the Steelers really want to compete, Nelson would be better than any draft pick, James Pierre, Justin Lane, anyone that you're going to replace him with, unless like you do it with like Adoree Jackson or someone else.
Cutting him would provide a dead money hit of $6.17 million. And that doesn't change pre or post June 1st. I'm just looking at this right now. And neither does a trade. Mind you, extending him doesn't lend you any dead money and just saves approximately $5 million on the cap. Now, of course, there's going to be a cap charge for that as well, but I don't know. It really sucks the way the cap went down the way that it did, because you really hate to see what happened here and what has happened with several other moves that we're going to get to in a minute here, but I just hate it because this was something that it really bothers me, A, that the cap number was this low, and B, that we didn't know that it was going to be this low until like less than a week before free agency. That really bothers me.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. The thing with that, though, I could have sworn that if the Steelers extended Nelson, even if they raised his APY to his average per year, if you guys don't know what APY is, to $12 million, shouldn't they still save on the cap if they structured the deal correctly this year? Shouldn't it have actually opened up cap space to give him an extension? Haven't we been talking about this? That extending Nelson would have been an option to open up cap space for the Steelers? That's what confuses me. Like, in a year where cap space doesn't make sense, why not extend your good player instead of doing this and pissing him off?
So I think, from what I understand, which is not much about this, but doing an extension like this will open up cap space if structured correctly. However, it's based on how much new money is involved with the contract, and if structuring the contract that way is done the way I think it would be, there's not as much new money in the first year, which to him would kind of defeat the purpose of signing said contract, as opposed to just getting an opportunity.
Free agency or trading.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing to point out is that if he's getting traded, his value is going to be driven down by two factors. Number one, he was reportedly asked to seek a trade, so he was asking to see a trade, which means that a team isn't going to want to give up a ton and then sign him to an extension. They won't give up as much because of that. And like we said before, they're just going to cut him theoretically if no one comes forward. So, I mean, I'd love for them to keep him, even if it might cause an issue. If you got to trade him at some point, I suppose. I'd love to see them wait until draft day if they are going to trade him, though. But I don't know. I get the feeling the Steelers aren't done making moves right now.
Yeah, it might be. You might get his best value at the draft, like when the Steelers traded Martavis Bryant right in the draft and got a third when no one thought he'd get anywhere close to that. So maybe that's the hope. Honestly, right now, if we have to trade him, I'm hoping to trade up in the first round, so the Steelers trade there first, or maybe like the Cowboys first, and they give Steven Nelson to the Cowboys. I'm hoping that happens. Supposedly, that's probably not Steven Nelson's value, but I think that would be nice. Maybe get in the range of like Patrick Surtain. I think that's how you say his name, Sutton. I put him in my first mock draft, but one of the top corners or something like that, or maybe even move up for another position. That's kind of the hope right now for me, anyway.
So the frustration that kind of exuded from that move was kind of that fire was met with ice, or vice versa, whatever you want to say. It was juxtaposed with the fact that Juju Smith-Schuster returned on a one-year deal, which you had kind of already talked a little bit about, Austin, but now the offense starting to solidify a little bit. Maybe receiver isn't a position that needs to be addressed in the draft now. I certainly was not expecting Smith-Schuster to return, and I'm a little conflicted about it, mostly because I'm kind of remembering the way he was used in last year's offense, and I'm nervous that he's not going to be his route tree isn't going to be expanded like it was early on in his career. And if they don't open up, use him down the field a little bit more, then I think bringing him back at all was a complete waste.
I like it regardless, even if he's used the same as last year, because of the money correlates pretty well with the yardage he put up and the receptions and the touchdowns. So when I saw the signing, I was originally mad because I'm like, they're going to give this man $11 million. And I said $10 million or less, $10 million or less. And then I saw the $8 million. I was like, that's exciting. That's a really good number. Because like you look at the other deals of the wide receivers, the Patriots messed up. The Patriots were like the first team to take a wide receiver off the board, and then decided on Nelson Aguilar on a 2-year, $26 million contract, $13 million a year. Then Curtis Samuel signed for 10, Will Fuller signed for 10. Kenny Galladay is reportedly still looking for 18.5, but he's still a free agent. And now you have Juju Smith-Schuster for 8.5. Oh, and Corey Davis for 11. So, I love Juju's deal, especially compared with Corey Davis. I think Corey Davis is a guy I still haven't fell in love with, and I like the deal. I thought Corey Davis was going to have more. I liked his deal with the Jets, where he got 3 years, $39 million, just a little bit over $11 million per year, because it wasn't exactly 39, it was a little bit over that. But, he hasn't topped 1,000 yards in his career. He put up 980 this year, so it's kind of nitpicking because he was like right there. But I think getting Juju for $3 million less than what Corey Davis got is really, really good. I was happy with that number, even if it just meant we're only holding on to him for one more year. But who knows? This could be leading to a big contract next year if the salary cap spikes, even though there's reports that the salary cap won't spike next year. We're going to have to see. There's going to be so much interesting stuff going into the next season. I'm looking too far ahead.
Well, that's the thing is I'm not – I know you said you don't care as much about it, but I do care about the way that he's utilized because a running back can run the routes that he was running last year. And I know that he's better at it, but I need to see him catching passes that are more than 3 yards down the field. I need to see him utilized down the field. His longest touchdown reception of the year this past year was like 28, 32 yards, something like that against Dallas. He can still make the plays down the field. The onus is on the offense and the quarterback to start going down the field a little more. And he's not Mike Wallace, I know that, but even 10, 15 yards down the field, I need something more because what we saw last year for good portions was not enough. And I know that he's at a reduced price, but I just don't like the idea of, in my opinion, wasting him on underneath routes only when he can do more than that. So I really hope the Steelers utilize him more. And I think that is a saving grace for this deal is the fact that you will now have the opportunity with, again, we don't know where the cap is going to be, but presumably it should still be going up at least a little bit. And with the Steelers having so few players under contract, there's an opportunity for Smith-Schuster to get locked in long term, which I don't know how you'd feel about that right now. You know, there's still a season before that decision would have to be made, but it's something I'd be at least willing to listen to.
Yeah. With the new deal that's the NFL just signed with ESPN joining the rotation of displaying Super Bowls and just getting normal games, there's a big deal. I forget exactly how much in the billions it was, but should alone cause the salary cap to go up a little bit next year at the least. And I'm hoping with vaccines going up that stadiums start getting to 50% capacity this season, which also should help with the salary cap going into next year. I have big hopes for this season. By the time football season comes around, I'm hoping stadiums can take a lot more people.
I'm wondering if they're going to take more than 50%.
See, this might be controversial to talk about, but I was talking about with my friend at work the other day. I was like, I hope that going forward that stadium say, listen, we'll take 75% capacity, but you got to be vaccinated. Everyone that comes into the stadium might be vaccinated. I feel like that might be a little bit controversial to say, but I was like, I feel like that'd be good. That'd be a good way to just like not spread disease, get more people into the stadium, and I think by then there'll be enough people vaccinated where you can say 75%. All you need to be vaccinated.
Well, I only say that because the Texas Rangers, say whatever you want, but they opened up 100% capacity at Globe Life Field already. So I'm thinking that we're heading towards that regardless. And I will say that there are some sporting events using those dogs that will apparently sniff for it because they can smell that, I guess. So that's kind of interesting.
The Dolphins are allowed at 100% capacity. It's going to be interesting to see because the NFL restricted them. Miami governor was like, "Bro, just open up the entire state." That was last season, like this in the middle of the season. So it's going to be up to like the NFL. I don't know if does the MLB regulate that? Did the MLB? I don't know who the MLB commissioner is because I don't watch baseball.
I don't know yet because they haven't started their season yet. They're still in spring training.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so I don't know if the NFL is going to restrict them like they did the Miami Dolphins because they're like, no, we're not gonna let you have that many people in the stadium.
In any case, let's move on here. Let's talk about. You want to talk about the players that have left the Steelers or the players that have either come back or have signed with the team?
Let's talk about the ones that left first.
Alrighty, well, this was going to be a painful process, and if you were a Steelers fan that knew anything about what was going on with the salary cap and the way this team operates anyways, you knew the Steelers were going to lose some players. So I don't think anyone should have been disappointed with the fact that they did, but the way they lost some of them was kind of interesting. So number one, we're going to talk about Bud Dupree because he's the one that got the big payday. I think we were expecting him to make probably the most money of the Steelers free agents. He signed a 5-year, $82.5 million deal with the Titans that could be up to $85 million in total. Dupree, a guy that we've talked about earning every penny of his money in this contract. We'll see if he fits with the Titans. They certainly needed help at edge rusher. I'm happy for Bud. But I'll be curious to see how he performs this time without an elite pass rusher on the other side.
Yeah, I really like that move. Apparently, Dupree had been thinking about the Titans for a year now because supposedly before he got franchise tagged, he was thinking about going to the Titans. Ramon Foster supposedly talked it up because obviously he's from Tennessee and he's actually now a beat writer, not a beat writer, a podcaster for...
I was going to say he does write for DK Pittsburgh Sports, which I am a subscriber for, so.
Yeah, that too. But he reports on the Tennessee Titans now too. It's kind of got him over there, but I think it's good for Dupree. I do worry that they might feel like they overpaid, like at least early on, but I think that overall it's a good signing, and I'm happy for Bud. He deserved that money, and it's right in that sweet spot of like between 16 and 18 where we thought he was going to get.
When you see a website like PFF talking about him being an overrated edge defender because a lot of his sacks were cleanup sacks and he's not getting as many pressures as a guy like TJ Watt or Cam Hayward on the Steelers, is that something that you noticed when you were thinking about this contract?
I am a little bit concerned, but I think the saving grace with Bud Dupree is that I think that we talked about it in the season. When we lost him, we weren't really worried about the pass rushing ability so much as his run stopping ability. He just got better at block shedding and getting off to stop the run in his fourth season and then again in his fifth season with the Steelers. So I think that at his base that he's still going to be a good run stopper for the Titans. So even if he doesn't come through as the pass rusher that he has been for the Steelers because of who he's played with, I think that the Titans still have gotten a decent player, at least against the run. I know that's not why you signed Bud Dupree to that big of a contract, but I think what I'm trying to say is his floor is pretty high for Bud.
So with Dupree leaving, he got the biggest deal. Matt Filer was another name that got pretty big money, 3 years, $21 million from the Los Angeles Chargers, who are apparently planning to keep him at guard. So I have seen it said. Definitely surprising to see that he got almost as much money as Juju this time in free agency, reuniting with Sean Serrat with the Chargers. Big money for a guy that some people thought was going to be able to re-sign here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, despite it being pretty high, I kind of like that deal because it gives the Chargers versatility. They needed offensive linemen, and while they're saying he's a guard now, it gives them the versatility that say, all right, is there a tackle or a guard that we really like? If there's a guard we really like, we can go guard. If there's a tackle we really like, we can get a tackle, and we could still start Matt Filer somewhere. assuming that he could flip whatever position he wants. So I like that for the Chargers. I think it's a pretty good signing with his versatility. Maybe a little bit expensive. I think for them it's worth it to protect their young quarterback in Justin Herbert. You got to kind of spend to protect those guys.
And you can afford to do that with him on a rookie contract right now.
Exactly.
Two other painful losses. We'll start first with Mike Hilton signing a 4-year, $24 million deal with the Bengals. A little cheaper than I thought it was going to be, but the Bengals apparently won him over with a front-loaded contract, so he will have an out after only, I think, 3 seasons, so it's possible that he could end up back on the street sooner rather than later. But he finally gets his payday. Happy for him. What do you think about that signing?
Yeah, this one hurt. This one was... I was prepared for Mike Hilton to leave, but this one hurt. There was reports that he was talking to the Bengals. I'm like, Mike, why? Like, I literally don't care if you go to the Browns or Ravens, but not the Bengals. Also, I was kind of thinking that it wasn't a scheme fit either, so I was like, for him, it might not work out in general, but regardless, then the Bengals signed Chidobe Awuzie from the Cowboys. So I was like, all right, we're good, we're in the clear. They signed a cornerback, and they said, nah, we're getting 2, and then they signed Mike Hilton, and that money just hurts. The $6 million a year is like, I was expecting him to get 7 or 7.5, so getting up to that $28 million on a 4-year contract, that does hurt. It hurts a lot, and then he went to the Bengals. I wish him luck. I really do think that he might be putting his career in jeopardy being there, though. I feel like that's not a good scheme fit. I don't know if they're going to use him right. Because if you're expecting Mike Hilton to drop into coverage every snap, you're not using Mike Hilton correctly. You got to use him a little bit like Jamal Adams, where it's like his position is safety and Mike Hilton's a slot corner, but you gotta get creative. I don't really feel like I've seen that from the Bengals in the past 5 years. But hey, who knows? Maybe they'll change it up just because they got him.
Your suspicions are correct, Austin. Last season, of the top players on the Bengals in terms of pass rushing snaps, their leader from the defensive backfield was Von Bell, who had 40 pass rushing snaps out of 1,061 snaps. Not a single defensive back besides him had more than 14. So they do not blitz their defensive backs often. Hilton, by the way, had 70 last season. And I believe he missed a couple games, too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
Mike Hilton was hurt.
His last game, he had played 22 snaps against the Browns the first time, and then didn't play again until the Jaguars game. So he missed about a third of the season right there. So
I can already see it. They're going to say Mike Hilton sucks because they drop him into coverage on every play, and then they go after him, and it's not where his strong suit lies.
And again, we're talking about a guy that's averaged between 60 and 85 pass rush snaps per season. Being paid the way he is, he might play more than 600 snaps a season, which is about where he's been averaging. So I think it's certainly realistic, like I said, with the contract out that he has, that he could be released within a couple years.
Yeah. He was so much better off going to the Jets. I know the Jets have different management now than when they had Jamal Adams. But he would be so much... And they have a slot corner, too, but it's just... I feel like he's better than the slot corners they have. I really feel like he would have been better as a Jet. I don't know if they put out an offer for him, though. Probably not, because they have slot corners.
Last one to talk about as far as free agents that have signed elsewhere. This one was the only unsurprising move that I saw, and it's the one that still cuts deep today, and that's Tyson Alualu leaving to go back to the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he was drafted 11 years ago, signing a 2-year, $6 million deal. Apparently, he wanted to move back home with his family, and the Steelers would lose a big piece of the middle of their defense. And at first, I was really upset with this, and I still am, but less so now. I was under the impression, I think you were too, Austin, that the Steelers simply didn't match the contract that the Jaguars offered, and only $6 million over 2 years is not a ton of money for a team that was supposed to be, they said themselves they were competing to not be able to show that kind of money for a guy that was an important part of the defense the last few seasons. I thought was extremely disappointing, and I did not think highly of the organization for it, but now we're seeing that it certainly seems as though Alualu was planning on leaving anyways.
Yeah. Alualu is a big loss, and it was really sad at the time, like you said. It now makes more sense that he said he wanted to go home. I really wish we could see the information on what the Steelers offered him and see if it was like more. See if the Steelers offered like 3.5 to try and keep him around. But I mean, if he really wanted to be in Jacksonville, he really wanted to be in Jacksonville. I understand that. He wanted to be with his family. I respected it. I am sad to see him go, though. He was a surprising hole filler after Javon Hargrave left, and it was so good. But I guess he gets to play in Jacksonville now with Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer.
And a ton of other free agents that they signed. So losing him definitely hurts. This was his PFF highest graded season of his 11-year career. So going into year 12, the Steelers now have a hole at nose tackle, and we can talk about that a little later. The 4 players the Steelers signed, we'll start with Ray Mcleod. He signed a 1-year, $1 million contract after we already talked about Juju. So filling out the bottom of the roster, should compete for the return man job. A nice gadgety player. I like him mostly in terms of the offense for what he could do in the Matt Canada offense this year. I think he has the biggest potential to add.
Yeah, and so the wide receiver room stays completely the same. No changes until the draft, at least. So the wide receiver room stays together, and I like this contract. I think that Ray Mcleod has been the best returner since like Antonio Brown when he was doing returns. So I think it was good to keep him around in a $1 million contract. It's not expensive at all, and I think that, like you said, he could contribute more on offense going into next year because of the Matt Canada offense that's going to be implemented. I'm excited to see what he can do.
The Steelers signed Chris Wormley, the defensive lineman, to a 2-year, $4.5 million contract. I thought it was a bit rich, and given the fact the Steelers had given up a draft pick to acquire him last season, I was really hoping they'd get him back on the cheap. But after Alualu left, getting Wormley back was pretty important because the depth behind him was pretty much non-existent. But I thought a quality signing, if not slightly expensive.
Yeah, the Wormley signing was expensive. I really thought you could probably get Wormley for closer to the minimum, more like a 2-year, $2 million contract, and like Ray Mcleod got. So that was a little bit of a tougher pill to swallow. But otherwise, I mean, you need the depth now with Tyson Alualu gone. So I guess overall, I'm okay with it.
Zack Banner got re-signed to a 2-year, $9.5 million deal. Again, a little more expensive than I thought, but the logic behind it, I understand. The Steelers believe in Zack Banner, which is kind of crazy to think about because he's had one game where he's played more than 25 snaps, which is kind of wild to think about. But Banner was, by all accounts, the Steelers' best offensive lineman in training camp last year. And if you overpay for him a bit this year and he pays off, then you have him at a extremely reduced rate for the second year of his contract as you potentially negotiate a long-term deal with him. So I understand the long-term goal of this contract, but I was hoping it'd be a little cheaper in year one.
Yeah, this was an interesting one. I think the Steelers were competing with other teams because Zack Banner himself said that he had contract offers from other teams. So I am cool with it for now. I mean, they said that the Steelers said that he was better than Chukwuma Okorafor coming out of camp. They said, you're the starter, not Okorafor. Let's get this done. So I'm going to believe in it. I'm going to say that this is a good contract.
And then last but not least, the Steelers re-signed Cameron Sutton to a 2-year, $9 million contract, which was relatively cheap. And he's slotted to be the starting slot cornerback with Mike Hilton gone, and now with Steven Nelson looking like he'll be departing, there's an opportunity for Sutton to be a starting outside corner as well. So good on him and the Steelers for getting the deal done. I was not expecting him to be pushed into duty this quickly.
And this signing looms so much larger now. I can't imagine what it would be like now if we lost both Sutton and Hilton, and then we got told that, oh yeah, you also have to get rid of Steven Nelson. Thank God they got this contract done. I was really hoping for Cameron Sutton to come back before that. Now he is so important. He could end up as the starting outside or slot corner. We don't even know yet. We're going to have to see what happens when the Steelers, after they draft.
Well, they could also have a scenario where in 2 receiver sets, he's an outside corner, and then he moves into the slot. The Rams did that with, I think, maybe Troy Hill, if I'm not mistaken. But so there's opportunities for him, and I bet he's kind of kicking himself a little right now, thinking he could have gotten a little more money.
Oh, yeah, 100%. He would have had so much more leverage had he waited.
So, of the remaining Steelers free agents that have not signed a contract, do you have any thoughts on these guys before we move on?
No.
Alrighty then. Let's move on to our inside linebackers then. So, regarding the inside linebacker position, this is one that we looked at pretty heavily in years past. What did you see anything interesting with this year's inside linebacker class? Because of the 4 players I looked at, I had an interesting observation. And that was that I felt that for the first time, I found more players that were maybe undersized but were good athletes, whereas the last few years I feel like all I've seen is these big, gigantic, powerful, slow linebackers with an occasional David Long Jr. in there, and occasionally, Devin Bush. But I feel like the game is starting to change at the college level, and we're seeing it more and more in the players we've looked at. At least that was my interpretation of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also, another thought I had is I felt like this year's inside linebacker class was pretty deep from the guys I looked at. I was looking, and a lot of my guys are actually pretty solid and at the top tier, and like a lot of them could go in round 2. So, deep.
Alrighty then. So we have 4 different linebackers to look at today. I'll introduce all of them. We've got Zavin Collins out of Tulsa, Dylan Moses from Alabama, Riley Cole from South Alabama, and Tony Fields II from West Virginia, along with Chaz Serrat from UNC, North Carolina, Monty Rice from Georgia, KJ Brit from Auburn, and Jamin Davis from Kentucky. Austin, do you want to kick things off?
Sure, I'll start with Chaz Serrat. He, like you said, played at UNC, is 6'1" and 227 pounds. Probably the most bizarre player I ever looked at. I say it all the time. I don't watch college football, so I kind of have no idea. Like, I know where some players are that came from at the NFL level, but I don't really pay attention. So he is bizarre because as a redshirt freshman, he started 7 games as the heir apparent to Mitchell Trubisky. He was a quarterback, Serrat, and he played for more than 3 games. He opened the year as a starting quarterback for UNC, throwing 183 passes with 107 completions for 1,342 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Then, not only was he a quarterback for the first year, he came into 2018 as a starting quarterback. That was bizarre to me. He was their projected starting quarterback. However, because the NCAA is trash, he got suspended 4 games for selling his team-issued sneakers. God forbid a player make money off their own stuff. So he got suspended for that. And then when he got to come back for the season, it wasn't good. He completed just 4 of 10 passes and 3 interceptions before requiring season-ending surgery on his wrist. It was after the injury where discussions about Serrat's future on the offensive side were brought up, and after considering transferring to another school to remain at quarterback, head coach Matt Brown convinced him to stay and become an inside linebacker. He didn't even play defense in high school. I went to look it up. I was like, a lot of players sometimes, not usually quarterbacks. Usually quarterbacks don't do it, but I was like a running back will also then play cornerback sometimes at the high school level, like Hassan Reddick. But he did not play defense in high school. Somehow, after an injury in 2019, after he came into 2018 as a starting quarterback, he was able to start 11 of 13 games at inside linebacker. Quick learner. In 2019, he was able to rack up 115 tackles, 66 of which being solo and 15 being for a loss, 3 passes defense, 6 sacks, a 4 fumble, and an interception, leading to becoming a first-team All-ACC linebacker in his first year at the position, and also runner-up for ACC Defensive Player of the Year. In 2020, his stats came down, but that's because UNC played only 11 games, and he still improved in other areas the stats couldn't show, while putting up 91 tackles, with 49 of them being solo, 6 sacks, 3 pass defense, forced fumble, a fumble recovery, and an interception. Following the 2020 season, Serrat declared for the draft. So let's talk about what's good about Serrat. His time at quarterback has really, really given him great instincts as a linebacker, which I was not expecting. It wasn't something I was really thinking about. He's able to read the quarterback's eyes and drift accordingly, and because of his background, he has good understanding of what opposing offenses are running. He has really good play recognition. This gives him an advantage on the defensive side. This is why his coverage in 2 years at linebacker has been so good. Is an understanding that a lot of other defensive players just don't have coming in. It's not just that his instincts in field, though. He's great place. He plays very patient, which is both a good and bad thing at times. But usually he's allowed to because he has really good speed and acceleration to play sideline to sideline. Even if he's a little bit more patient, he could get there still. He trusts in his speed and acceleration. Now, he also excels in zone coverage. The speed has allowed him to be a solid player in man as well, but I really felt like he excelled in zone. He has especially good mobility for a size 2 with length to match to extend his coverage range. Then as a tackler, he showed some good improvement going from 2019 to 2020 in pursuit angles, where in 2020 I actually didn't really see any problems at all in terms of the angle he took. Because of this, he's been able to chase down players all over the field. And going back to his speed for a moment, while not often, he has used it to beat slower tackles on the outside on blitzes, like in strict game in 2020. Something that didn't come up on tape, but I believe that Serrat could be dangerous with, is the ball in his hands on turnovers. Probably more than other defenders, because when he switched positions, before he switched positions, he was more like a Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray type, where he would run the ball a lot. He actually had a good amount of rushes before switching his position, so he knows how to handle the ball. It's a kind of a little tiny positive, because it's like in this very specific scenario, Serrat might survive, but I did want to point that out, that he was actually like a mobile quarterback and ran with the ball. Strength quickly, he has very strong arms, having 27 reps on a bench press done by the Draft Network about 2 weeks ago now. This has allowed him to be surprisingly good at getting off blocks to make tackles, at least I think so. Lastly, he has room on his lower body to add muscle mass. His frame isn't completely filled out yet. So, with the good things over with, let me get into the negatives. I feel like the lower body strength is an issue with Serrat. He has long, thin legs that don't give him a strong base. This is obviously fixable, but I worry about how fixable, because he was largely ineffective against blockers with better positioning and stance because of it. I'm not just talking about going against offensive linemen either. Running backs were able to handle him pretty easily when he wasn't able to convert his speed into power, and just doesn't have the leg strength to push a guy back. It goes without saying, offensive linemen blocking him were a major problem. Anytime he got blocked by one, he was ineffective. Which I believe brings me to the worst aspect I found of Serrat's game. Blitzing. Serrat wasn't completely ineffective. With the right plays, with him coming screaming down the middle free, he was actually solid, because he has the speed. If you're free and you have speed acceleration, you're going to be great at it. But other than those times where you're scheming him to be free, which is not going to be often, blitzing him was completely wasting his talent. As I mentioned before, he didn't show he could turn his speed into power, so once he was blocked, he was a non-factor on the play. Moving into other problems with his game, there are still times you could tell that he is new to this position. Understandably, he's only played linebacker for 2 years now, after all. There's going to be times where there will be times where the processing is just a little slow and cause him to be a bit slower to react. Or maybe it's better to call it too patient. It's where I kind of said the patience is a double-edged sword. He seemed too patient at times, too content in waiting. It feels like he may wait too long when he sees something. Sort of related to that, he sometimes waits for his target to come to him, resulting in him mostly absorbing contact rather than dishing it out. This is also something that may connect to a weak lower body. Continuing with his tackling, it can be inconsistent at times, where sometimes he can be too fast for his own good and not be able to wrap up someone because of it, like that missed sack he with Carolina in 2019, and that hurt my soul to watch, that missed sack. He it was on a blitz. He was free on the blitz, and he missed sack. It hurt me. But it's been on display a couple times other than that. Not quite overrunning tackles, just coming in too fast, not being able to wrap up properly, not getting his arms around correctly. The last thing I will say is for a guy who's shown to be really solid in coverage, I wish for more picks from him on tape, but that's, I guess, kind of nitpicky. I wanted to see more so I really wanted to see him run with the ball. I really wanted to see if he could just run over people because of his offensive background. So overall with Serrat, he reminded me of one of the earliest prospects I looked at, and that being Hassan Reddick, the Cardinals' 2017 12th overall pick. They have a lot in common, both being 6'1.5" while also being former offensive players. Granted, Reddick was a running back in high school, so it's different, but their styles were similar too. Both players were guys I thought could stretch the field with their good fluidity, acceleration, athleticism. Also, I looked at Reddick as a 4-3 linebacker, and there are people that think Serrat should be a 4-3 linebacker as well. Now, personally, I think it would be a waste for Serrat, as I think the only way he could win the edge at his size right now is purely with speed, and I just don't like his pass rushing abilities. So I do think Serrat should stay as an inside linebacker rather than a 4-3 edge, because I think he could really be a gem in this draft. That being said, I think Serrat goes in the late second round, but I wouldn't be surprised if he slipped into the third round, as this is actually a pretty solid inside linebacker class, as I said from before, from what I've seen. So I watched his highlights. I watched his game versus Miami in 2020. I watched versus Syracuse in 2020, and I watched versus South Carolina in 2019 to develop my opinion. Which player would you like to start with?
So I'm going to start with a guy that we've seen connected to the Steelers a handful of different times during the course of this offseason process already, and that's Zavin Collins from Tulsa. A redshirt junior, standing tall at 6'4" and yet big at 260 pounds as well. A former first-team All-Oklahoma player that won a state title in 2017 in high school. And after a redshirt season his freshman year, he started 10 games right off the bat, made 2 different freshman All-American teams, then was a second-team All-AAC selection his sophomore year, and then this past season was the Bronco Nagurski winner, Chuck Bednarik winner, which are 2 different Defensive Player of the Year awards, and also won the Lombardi Award, which is typically the best lineman or linebacker, and also the runner-up for the Butkus Award, which was the best linebacker award, a consensus All-American, the AAC Defensive Player of the Year, first-team All-AAC, and had numerous statistics to his name, and obviously a bunch of different accolades. So, as was the case last time, I am breaking down my prospects slightly differently than Austin, and I'm talking about different traits and how, in my opinion, I graded them based on what I saw from their tape. So, starting with the first category of football IQ or instincts, I thought this was pretty good. Zavin Collins has a lot of experience across 3 seasons. It showed pretty well, in my opinion. He had a good ability to recognize plays in short and quick order, didn't feel very reactionary. It felt like he knew what he was doing, and he was pretty decisive overall. I felt like he was pretty knowledgeable about his coverage as well, finding where he was supposed to be and not straying from his assignments. I gave him an A. For his tackling, it's okay, I guess is the best way to put it. Based on the PFF grades, he was average. Collins has been an improving tackler over his time in school, but I felt like there were a bunch of sure-handed tackles, and there were also times where he was whiffing and he was getting shrugged off pretty easily. He got stiff-armed by a quarterback at one point on the tape that I watched too, and I feel like that's something that's not going to get better right away when he gets to the NFL. That's something that you have to be wary of with these hyper-athletic players, is that sometimes they're going to let players slip through their fingers. So I gave Collins a B-. He's not bad at it, but there are more tackles missed than you would like him to miss. When it came to his block shedding, this is something I felt was a big issue for him. It's not where you want it to be. He's struggling with his play strength, and he's having a lot of trouble getting off blocks when he gets engaged, especially with offensive linemen. If he can't duck through the tackle, it felt like he's having trouble getting off or through his blocks. Like I said, it's going to take some time to get better in this area, but there's something workable there, but right now it's not good, so I gave him a C. As far as competitive toughness and play strength goes, he's a tough player. There's no doubt about it, with a strong desire to be involved in the play. He's not afraid to meet a bigger lineman in the hole. Like I said, he can't disengage easily, but he's not afraid to meet one in the hole. And like I said, he's going to have to beef up in order to take on the bigger offensive linemen in the NFL. And he's not the run defender he could be at this time. So play strength and competitive toughness are solid, but not where you want them to be. So I gave him a B-. His lateral mobility is next, and I felt this was very good. It's not common to see players that are his size, 6'4", 260, moving as well as he does, but he is quite a rare athlete in that regard. He displayed the ability to run players down across the field, and he might not be the fastest linebacker in the NFL, but he's no slouch either. He can move pretty quickly, and it's pretty intimidating to see a guy that big moving the way he can. So I gave him an A- for his lateral mobility. For his coverage skills, he got, I'll give it right now an A-. He wasn't asked to do a ton of different coverages, but what he was asked to do, he was doing very well. Covering running backs in man coverage and spot dropping in zone. It was about as good as you could expect from a collegiate linebacker. His PFF coverage grades reflects this as well, as he was actually the highest graded linebacker in coverage last season among 396 linebackers that played at least 20% of the defensive snaps their team played in this year. Or actually, rather, 20% of the snaps of the highest snap count for any linebacker last season. So time will tell if he can do more than that, if he can carry tight ends up the seam. But at least in a limited capacity, he did well, I meant to say. As far as his ability to shoot gaps and blitz, I felt like Collins had a pretty good burst getting into the gap, getting into the backfield, and he made a number of plays on tape. Speed obviously being his primary ally in this case, and he's a good blitzer from the inside and can make life difficult for quarterbacks up the middle. But what I really loved was his ability as a blitzer off the edge. He spent some time there as well as an off-the-ball linebacker, and I think the overall pop on his tape on the edge might be a bit too good to be true. He needs a bit of a better bend going around the arc, but he has developed a couple moves, and he looks like a really solid blitzer no matter what. So I think he's a truly versatile player in that regard. So as far as his blitzing and his gap shooting ability, he got a B and A respectively for those attributes. Regarding his feet and change of direction, I thought his footwork was excellent in zone coverage and in run defense. I did feel like he could fine-tune it while blitzing off the edge. I can help him. But his change of direction abilities are good. He's definitely a sideline-to-sideline type of linebacker, A- there. Lastly, his pursuit and motor. He's a never-give-up type of player. I meant to say he's not Mark Barron, who occasionally gave up on plays. We might remember a couple of years ago. But there were times I felt like he could have given more on plays that maybe weren't in his general vicinity, and it's not bad, but he's also not the highest motor player either. So I don't know if he's tired because he's running sideline to sideline, but I was a little disappointed to see that. But again, it's not a horrible issue, so I gave him a B for that. So overall, when talking about Zavin Collins, we're talking about a really good athlete, a rare player with a unique skill set and size. He's not the prototypical speed linebacker we see in today's NFL, like Devin Bush. He plays more of a 4-3 outside linebacker position rather than a 3-4 inside linebacker position, and he has some experience as an edge defender too, which is pretty intriguing. His tackling needs to get better, and his play strength should improve in time, but I think he's got a good future as a linebacker, and of course the versatility on the edge could really help teams as well. Where he goes, I think, will really make or break his NFL career. So, his unique skill set is not something that's seen with a lot of players. So where he goes and how he's used is going to really tell the story for what kind of NFL player he is. I think he's a late day 1 or early day 2 selection. If he's there at 55, I'd think about it. If I'm the Steelers and I'm picking the second round, if he somehow lasts that far, I'd take him the second round, but taking him at 24 is kind of a tough ask for me to be kind of a tough ask to me, Austin, to be completely fair. I don't know if you had thought much about Collins at all or if you had thoughts regarding him, but good player. I just don't know if I like him at 24.
I feel like that's how it usually works. I learned last year that if people are claiming this player to go to the Steelers at a certain point, they're likely not that good. I don't know what it is with Steelers fans. I think they're just obsessed. See, I don't know who's a fan of Tulsa, though. I don't even know where Tulsa is.
Tulsa is in Texas, I believe.
Sure, I believe you. You could tell me it was in Idaho, and I'd probably believe you. But
Oklahoma.
It's like I feel like people get.
It's in Oklahoma.
Okay.
I'm an idiot.
People get obsessed with certain players, and they just look at the stats and stuff, and then they're like, "Must be the Steelers." I felt like every person that I saw mock to the Steelers last year, I hated every single one. Like it's just how it goes.
Feel free to continue then.
Yeah, I'm going to actually skip around. I didn't do it in this order, but I'm going to go to KJ Brit from Auburn. He's 6 foot and 239 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school in Alabama before joining Auburn for the 2017 season. In 2017, he was the backup middle linebacker, but played in every game, getting 4 tackles through then. In 2018, he was still a backup, but got to see more playing time as he put up 23 tackles, 1.5 for a loss, and a pass breakup. In 2019, he became the starter in our first-team All-SEC accolades for his 69 tackles, 10 of them being for a loss. And in 2020, he was voted team captain and hoped to build upon a strong 2019 campaign, but was only able to play in 2 games for needed season-ending surgery on his thumb, which I got to watch. It was kind of bizarre. I got to watch the play. He got injured. Tough guy. He just played through the rest of the game. He was able to return from the injury and play in the Senior Bowl later in the season, though, following that season-ending injury for like the regular season, but following the senior Bowl, he declared for the draft. So the good thing about Brit is he's a big boy. In terms of weight, he is the biggest linebacker I looked at, and I gave him an ability that I saw from none of the other ones, and that is being able to actually push back an offensive lineman at times. His strength and size are too much to take on for some guys if he has the right positioning. He also hits hard. He has some really nice takedowns in the Oregon game in 2019 and also in the Minnesota one, where he came downhill with solid acceleration and took guys down. Brit was also a really good tackler. Once he got his feet square and his arms around his target, he was able to secure them down, and nobody I saw was able to get off his tackles. He really fits the thumper role at the NFL level as he excels in areas like that. Going into the negatives, what concerns me with Brit is that the complete lack of agility and play speed. Sure, he has solid acceleration, I'll give him that, but even getting to his top speed is extremely slow. His top speed is extremely slow, I should say, not getting to there. Now, couple that with his below average change of direction speed and bad pursuit angles he takes, and he's going to have a real tough time hitting anyone at the next level because he'll never get there in time. Leading up to the draft, he really, really needs to work on the pursuit angles. That's the only thing he could really fix in that regard. He could drop some weight, but I think dropping weight will sacrifice some hit power, and I'm not sure will yield enough speed to only drop like 5 pounds or so. Like I feel like it's not going to make that big of a difference. Another big concern is how bad he is at locating the ball. He has almost no instincts, and RPOs really messed him up. He's always coming up for the run, and it was almost always a pass because they knew they could trick Auburn's middle linebackers for whatever reason. Because it was both. It wasn't just him. For some reason, RPOs just really messed with Auburn's middle linebackers when I was watching. Not just the RPOs, though. He really struggled against screens and just overall processing when there was a lot of moving pieces. If the offense he was going up against wasn't simple, he just struggled to decipher what was going on and where the ball was. Another thing, I was disappointed in his ability to block shit and also take on move blocks. I expected better for a guy his size with his strength, but he just wasn't very good at it. Then lastly, his coverage absolutely needs work. He doesn't sink enough at times in the zone, and unfortunately, due to his speed limitations, I don't think you can really play in man unless lined up against a running back in the backfield. And even that's a dangerous game to play if the running back is agile, fast, and can catch out of the backfield, because Brit will likely be too slow to get there. But it's not all bad. There's definitely some running backs I could think at the NFL level that he could line up against in man. Like, I was thinking Zach Moss. Zach Moss 100% Brit could line up against because the speed there is like kind of similar. I think that he could keep up. But so overall with Brit, the thing that came to mind is, do Steelers fans miss Vince Williams? Do you miss Vince Williams already? Because this is Vince Williams. Not quite as good He's a thumper type with pretty similar height, weight, same vertical jump coming out, and the speeds are identical. Vince Williams ran a 4.76, and according to Brit's pro day that just came through when I was looking at him, he ran a 4.75, so 0.01 off. I think that pro day helped him. I don't believe that he ran a 4.75. We know that the pro day numbers are never as accurate as like an actual combine, but so I think that Brit is somewhere in the 4.8 range, either like maybe 4.82, 4.83, but it may push into the 4.8s. But to compensate, he's stronger than Vince coming out, putting up for 24 reps on the bench press compared to Vince's 22. Anyhow, this is a Brit going somewhere between rounds 3 to 5, but I disagree so heavily. Brit plays a dying position in which he still has a lot of problems to work through, where it could even hold him from being a goal line rotational player at the next level immediately, because that's where I think he would thrive. Right now, he could rotate in on the goal line, short yardage situation, be a big body, be the thumper you need where you know that they're probably going to run, and he can do that. But I think that his problems are going to hold him back from that. He has like no instincts at the moment. I think Brit is a 7th rounder or even an undrafted free agent. Not many teams are really looking for a thumper anymore. And with all his downsides, I just view him as a player to take a late round flyer on to see if he can become Vince Williams at the next level. And if your like ceiling is Vince Williams, I love Vince Williams, but it's just not very good ceiling in my opinion. So I would not, where the evaluations are right now, I don't like it. I think he's a 7th rounder. So that was KJ Britt from Auburn. I watched his career highlights. I watched versus Georgia in 2020, which was the game he got hurt. I watched versus Minnesota in 2019, and I started watching other videos. I don't know if you found these yet. I wanted to mention it. Auburn defense versus Oregon offense in 2019. Not as easy because you have to locate where the player is, which is where the other ones are lazily done for us, where they circle the player and stuff. And obviously, not every player's on the field for every snap, but it was very helpful, and it got me another game to watch for him. So, yeah.
Yeah,
that was KJ Britt.
I had a couple games where it's like Cincinnati offensive line versus West Virginia defensive line, if that's what you're talking about.
Sort of, but it wasn't just all, because I saw those videos too. They were kind of separate. I got to see like the whole defense.
Yeah, I didn't get to see that, but I see what you mean, where you kind of use it to get some more tape on a guy, because there's not a lot out there this year. This is probably the hardest year that we've ever had looking for tape thus far, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, these are high profile guys. It's like, not KJ Britt, but Chaz Serrat is a highly tenured. People think he's going to go maybe as early as 2nd round, and Zavin Collins, like you said, is possibly a 1st rounder. It's not there this year for some reason.
So I'm going to single in on my second prospect, Dylan Moses, the senior from Alabama, former 5-star recruit. Played in all 4 of his seasons. He only started 2 games his freshman year, but was a finalist for the Butkus Award his 2nd season. A former team captain, and made the All-American team last season, and made the All-SEC team twice. And over the course of his career, started 29 games, racked up 196 tackles, broke up 6 passes, and picked off 2 passes. So let's move on to the traits with his football IQ. This is terrible. I'm not going to lie. He might be the most clueless football player I've ever seen on the football field, and it might have just been a bad stretch of games, but my goodness. I was able to cherry pick just a handful of clips that I sent to Austin and a couple other of my friends, where this guy is caught horribly out of position, either biting on a play fake or thinking that it's a play where the quarterback kept it and he handed off to the running back. In 2 separate clips, there was one that I remember sending to you, Austin, and I'm sure you remember it, where he starts fading into a hook zone on the right side, near the right sideline, near the hash marks. And meanwhile, the running back, who he would have had a chance to tackle if he had closed in on him, meanwhile, he's running right up the middle of the field full speed, like not even a second thought, running right past him. And then the second one, there's a tight end leaking in the middle of the field on a play action fake, and right in front of the official, I mean right in front of the official, he basically drags him down and the pass is intercepted. And it's just, this guy has absolutely no awareness. And for a guy that started 29 games, played in 39, I don't really know what to tell you as far as why it's so bad right now and why it hasn't gotten better. But this is a big concern. He gets a D- here. He's a pretty good tackler, about as sure-handed as it gets, missing just 13 tackles over the course of his career. Sometimes he has bad technique, but I think for the most part he does a good job, so I gave him an A here. For block shedding, I thought it wasn't bad. Not great either, but the fact that he's not the biggest linebacker, he can still be shifty enough to get around guys. I think he's good enough to make a lot of plays in the running game, and the fact that he's racked up all these tackles, I think, is good evidence of that, so I gave him a B. His competitive toughness and play strength, pretty solid toughness. He's built like an Alabama tough linebacker and has a lot of experience in the NFL proving grounds of the SEC. His play strength, though, as he is a bit undersized, is lacking right now. You'd expect it to be the case with a leaner and faster linebacker. I'm sure this will get better in time in the NFL, but right now it's not good enough, so B-. Lateral mobility is excellent. Moses is fast, and he really is a sideline-to-sideline guy. He's explosive, and he can keep up with with running backs and tight ends around the field, so A-. Coverage skills, he can do spot drop and hook zones, but that's really about it. He doesn't go much further down the field, and if he does, he's not doing a good job. I'm fearful if he doesn't improve, he'll be targeted at the NFL level because he can't translate his athletic traits into better coverage, so he gets a B-. His gap shooting ability I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw from him on tape as far as shooting gaps. Even though he's not overly strong, and he doesn't do a good job of reading the play in front of him, when he was able to commit, I felt that he did a good job of getting through a gap and could make plays in the backfield. Unfortunately, there weren't as many as I was hoping, but still, I think it's a pleasantly good trait of his, so I gave him a B+. His feet and change of direction ability. This is an area where you can see that Moses has the talent, but again, can't put it all together. His hips aren't fluid, and it just makes him a bit harder to stick to targets when he's in coverage, especially when it comes to carrying tight ends up the seam and trying to recover on play action fakes. He's got to really dig his feet in the ground. Not excelling in this area hurts his bottom line because he's already struggling with the ability to read plays, so his issues are compounding themselves here, so I gave him a C+. His pursuit and motor, high motor player, never gives up on the play, will run down players fast across the field in order to make a stop. And he's a real team player. I really felt like Moses was never really out of the play. And being a former team captain, you expect to see your guys do something like that, always chasing down offensive players across the field, never giving up on the play. So I gave him an A- for that. For blitzing, I felt like he was advanced here. He's a classic attacking inside linebacker with good gap responsibility and integrity. Even when he's not the guy who's supposed to be getting the free rush at the quarterback, he does a great job on stunts similar to what we saw from Cam Hayward and Bud Dupree over the past few years. He'll take his assignment and carry him up into the lineman next to him to make sure that he's getting his teammate a free run at the quarterback. I think that's very important for young players to be able to do, and he did a good job of it in college. I gave him a B+. And overall, when looking at Dylan Moses, an athletic and efficient tackler at the linebacker position, he has plenty of experience under his belt at the SEC level, and he's not the best athlete like Zavin Collins, but he's still a really good one. And he has some versatility as a pass rusher from both the inside and outside, and could lend himself to a potential career in special teams because of that. If he can ever get his instincts figured out, he might be like a pretty solid linebacker in the NFL. A bit undersized, but still a solid one. But if he, the issue is he hasn't put it together yet. Why would he at this point? You just hope that he can. But the fact that he hasn't done it yet is concerning, and I think that's going to keep him, that and his size is going to keep him from being a day one prospect for sure, and probably a day two prospect as well. I think you're looking at him early fourth round right now. Again, there's traits here. There's a player that there's something to work with here, but I'm not sure if you can get exactly what you're looking for and if you can get a legitimate contributor on defense. So overall, I have him graded as a B- type of player. Interesting, some flaws, but there's also something to work with as well. Who is next on your list to talk about today?
For me, it's Jamin Davis. He's from Kentucky. He's 6'3" and 234 pounds. He came out of high school in Georgia before deciding to go to Kentucky for the 2017 season, a season in which he redshirted. In 2018, he was a reserve player, but played in all 13 games, got 10 tackles and an interception. In 2019, he played in all 13 games, but only started one, but still got 30 tackles and an interception. The 2020 season is where he took a big step up, starting and playing in 10 of 11 games after only missing one due to COVID protocols, where he posted 102 tackles, 1.5 sacks, with 3 picks, including a pick 6. Despite having another year of eligibility, Jamin declared for the draft. I just want to start off by saying that Davis could be an immediate contributor on special teams. I got to watch tape of him playing on the field goal and PAT coverage team as a safety, so that's a plus. As for his size, he's the biggest linebacker I looked at today, standing at 6'3", and likely has the biggest arm span, which quarterbacks have to respect when he's in coverage. With the size comes pretty solid play strength, which he showed when taking on smaller blockers a couple times on tape. He also has a play speed, too. In the Georgia game, he ran down a running back that had caught the ball on the run from over 5 yards away. When he didn't start moving until after the ball was released, I was pretty impressed with that. It was pretty fast for an inside linebacker to catch up with the running back. I don't know much about the running back, but it didn't really matter to me. I still thought it was impressive. There's a lot of potential with Davis as a block shedder. At least I felt like, because he showed that at times he could get around smaller blockers and had the vision to be able to find the ball carrier when blocked and still try to make the tackle. Speaking of his vision, I believe that to be the best thing, I believe that the vision is the best thing about Davis. His ability to stay focused and find the ball and then flow to the area where it's at. He always seemed to know where the ball was. Going to his tackling, it was pretty consistent. There weren't any big whiffs I saw on his tape. He appeared to be a pretty sound tackler. And then something I liked about him was that he lined up directly over tight ends, and even got to see him line up over Kyle Pitts for a couple reps. And he did his job the few times he was asked. So on the bad side of things, similar to Serrat, Davis lacks experience, and that could turn teams away from him. In fact, Serrat had the same amount of starts at linebacker in 2019 than Davis had his entire college career, that being 11. And from what I saw on tape, he comes off the field pretty frequently. He literally only had a minute and a half of tape to watch in the Florida game, so I worry about his abilities as a full-time starter. Then against bigger blockers, he really struggled. He got pushed right out of the way for a long Georgia rushing touchdown, and that was just the worst I saw. I didn't see him show the ability to work off of offensive lineman blocks at all on tape, and this is another big concern for me. He may be able to grow and get better, but for now he needs to work on something to deal with linemen blocking him, whether it be getting more strength or becoming better at hand fighting, something like that. Because right now, at the college level, you can only take on smaller guys. If I were him, though, I'd focus on the hand fighting, as it seemed to be the biggest problem. Like I said, I saw him get off the smaller blockers with the strength alone. Getting more active, better hand usage when taking on blockers would help him probably against both, and at the next level would be a good skill to have and improve. The last two things that were his change of direction speed was just average, and then he also took bad pursuit angles on tape a few times. Not a lot, but it came up enough where it was noticeable. So overall with Davis, a lot of people have him as a second rounder, and even places like Walter Football have him as possibly being a late first rounder because of his athletic abilities combined with his great vision. They actually have him as the third best linebacker in this class. However, I definitely view him to be too raw to be a first rounder. I think Davis will go in the second, but honestly, I personally wouldn't touch him until the third because he seems a lot more like a project player than others are making him out to be, at least in my opinion. He gives off Terrell Edmonds vibes, so take that as you will. Taking the risk on Edmonds early somewhat worked out. Unlike Edmonds, however, Davis can't be an instant starter. Maybe a rotational piece like he was kind of used in Kentucky at times, but he needs time to develop. But he can develop into a full-time starter. I just don't know. I just don't. He's just not there yet. He needs time to develop. So I watched his 2020 highlights. I watched versus North Carolina State. I watched versus Georgia. I watched versus Auburn. I watched Auburn offense versus Kentucky defense. And then also, for the first time, I looked at his NFL draft profile. He was one of the few players that actually has an NFL draft profile. I took a look. I didn't really take anything from there. I just wanted to mention it all the same. So who would you like to go to next?
All right, I'm going to talk about Riley Cole from South Alabama. Next, a redshirt senior, 6'3", 225 pounds, a former three-star prospect at outside linebacker at Alabama, and a first-team All-Alabama selection as a junior. He had some injury history throughout his college career. Had 2 season-ending injuries in his first 3 seasons on campus before completing his last 2 seasons in college fully healthy, thankfully. And he finished having approximately 31 starts. I couldn't find an exact number. The numbers differ depending on the website, but he was a former All-Sun Belt selection twice and racked up over 200 career tackles in college. Let's move on to his traits, talking about his football IQ. I felt it was pretty good. He played several positions in college and transitioned from an edge player to an off-the-ball linebacker, and it feels like when I was watching his tape that he kind of knew everything that was going on within the defense and was a pretty good instinctual player, so I gave him an A-. Tackling was a big concern, though. A lot of instances where he was shaken off by the ball carrier or was run over even while making a tackle. His 32 missed tackles in his college career may not seem overwhelming, but on tape it felt like there were a lot of other plays where maybe he wasn't charged with a missed tackle, but I felt like he could have made a better play on the ball carrier. I don't know if better strength training will help him get stronger, which will help him hang on, but I just feel like there's a physicality issue when watching him play defense. When it comes to, I gave him a C+. When it comes to block shedding, watching him against tight ends and running backs was one thing. He did a good job getting around those blocks, ripping past them, but with the offensive lineman, he was getting swallowed up more often than not. He's going to have to find a way to try to get better in this area, or it's going to be a long road to success in the NFL. I gave him a C. Competitive toughness and play strength. He's played through some big injuries. I don't think his teammates can question his desire for the team, and he's also not overly big for the position, so you have to wonder if his frame can add much more muscle. That being said, Vince Williams wasn't a big player either, so maybe he could add some strength to his frame. But again, Cole's strength isn't where it needs to be compared to the rest of his peers at the inside linebacker position. B- for that. Lateral mobility, it's not bad at all, but it's also not at the same level of guys like Dylan Moses or Zavin Collins. I don't think he's slow. He's got the ability to move and keep players close to him, and he's not a slowpoke either, but he's, I guess, just average at it, so I gave him a B. Coverage skills were not that good. Very limited palette of coverages that he ran, and some of the different coverages were a result of just playing different positions. He did very limited things, and he was not good at it. Opposing quarterbacks feasted on him this past year in coverage. He gave up 88% completions and a passer rating of 121.2 when he was targeted. Oh, sorry, not last year, over the course of his college career. So he gets a C- for that. His gap shooting ability gets a B+ because it's one of his better traits because he's actually able to combine his athleticism with his instincts from experience. So he had a lot of positive plays getting through a gap and making a tackle in the backfield. I gave him a B+. His feet and change of direction skills, not good in my opinion. His footwork is kind of elongated. Hips don't really help him out. And when it comes to not just engaging in tackles, but also when it comes to trying to get across the field, play action plays can really get Cole behind the 8 ball, in my opinion. I gave him a C. His pursuit doesn't always take the best angles in the open field. Better at it. He's better at it when the ball carrier is out by the sideline. Motor is very good. Another player that never says die, and I like that. So I gave him a B. Blitzing, not a strong suit for Riley Cole. Someone with experiences in, it is a strong suit, I meant to say. someone with experience as an edge rusher who has an understanding of how to get to and impact the quarterback when rushing. He has versatility as a rusher both inside and outside. I think that he's a pretty good blitzer, so I gave him a B+. Overall, Riley Cole, one of those small school prospects with a ton of college experience, had a bunch of tackles in college, with some previous injury concerns and a serious problem when it comes to shedding blocks and overall play strength in general. There are limitations to his game, but on the plus side, he's a solid athlete, and he has some position versatility as both an inside linebacker and outside linebacker. He's pretty instinctive, and again, he has a lot of experience, so it's questionable whether or not he'll ever become a starter in the NFL, but I think there's a good chance for him to be a good special teams contributor. I would think a guy like that will go sometime during day 3. I would guess the middle to later end of day 3. I could live with a late round pick, maybe like a 5th round pick on a guy like Cole. Overall, I gave him a C+ grade. With that in mind, your last prospect today is Monty Rice from Georgia. Tell me a little bit about him.
He is 6'1" and 235 pounds. This is a guy to watch. This is very important. Steelers were seen all over Georgia's pro day. They actually signed someone from last year's draft that went undrafted. I think his name was Tyler Simmons. He was a wide receiver. So this is a name to watch because Mike Tomlin was at Georgia's pro day and talking to all these guys. Anyhow, about Rice is that he came out of high school as a 4-star recruit with offers from Alabama, LSU, and Georgia. He originally committed to LSU but pivoted back and ended up going to Georgia. He played as a backup behind Roquan Smith in 2017. He was still able to get 22 tackles, including 10 solo. Going to the next year, he got more playing time, getting 59 tackles, including 25 solo, a sack, a forced fumble, and a pass defense. 2019 was his strongest season, logging a career-high 89 tackles, with 50 of them being solo, and also 3 passes defense. Despite a great season, he came back for his senior season in 2020 to improve his draft stock and played through a foot injury that was described as being much worse than what was reported through the year. Understandably, his stats came down, but they're still solid, where he got 49 tackles, with 30 of them being solo, a sack, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and a pass defense. Following his senior season, he declared for the draft. And, I'm going to keep it. I was thinking about doing the negatives first this time, but I'll do the positives. Start off good. Best things about Rice is that he's great vision and knowledge of where the ball is. It made him a great run stopper over at Georgia during his career because of those solid instincts. He also shares those solid instincts, often communicating with his team pre-snap to get everyone to recognize what he sees. He's a leader. He was voted team captain 3 times, Georgia in the 2020 season, so he's respected and he calls out what he sees. He also flows to the ball really well and showed to be able to see past blockers and then work through them to try and make the tackle. Also, an excellent gap filler. There was a 4th down and 1 play at the end of the Tennessee game, and he filled the hole perfectly for one of his teammates to come in and clean up the runner and stop Tennessee from getting the first down. Another good thing about Rice is he has solid speed. People were concerned about his speed. I thought his play speed on tape was fine, and then he solidified it exactly where I thought he would be at, and he ran a 4.57 at his pro day. Again, pro days are a little bit off, so I guess maybe he is a little bit slower, but to me, his play speed was nothing of concern, and I actually thought it was solid. I thought it was something to be happy about. It was positive. He has, along with solid speed, his acceleration and great change of direction speed that allows him to get to the ball carrier when coming downhill. Something else I really loved were his pursuit angles. Out of all the linebackers I looked at, he was easily the best at tracking where he needed to be and taking the right angle. Talking about his coverage, I read a lot of people critiquing him. I don't know why my brain wasn't working for there. Critiquing him for not being able to being that good at coverage, but honestly, I felt like he was more than serviceable in zone coverage, showing solid abilities to sink far enough and cover decently. Something else he's pretty solid at is block shedding, showing him to be able to get through blocks using his great vision to find the ball and still make the tackle. It's part of the reason why he led his team in tackles in 2019 with 89. The last thing is he has special teams experience from his time at Georgia, which is always a plus for rookies coming into the league. It gets you on the field faster, gets you contributing faster if you play special teams. So going to the negatives, What's likely going to concern people the most about Rice was that he was a 2-down linebacker at Georgia, often being taken off the field in 3rd-down passing situations for other players because Georgia didn't trust his coverage abilities so much in those long situations. Speaking of his coverage, he has almost no experience in man coverage. He almost strictly plays zones, so he won't really be a fit for a team that runs a lot of man schemes unless they want to let him develop and sit and see if he can become a better player in man situations. I mean, he's really untested. It's not him becoming a better player. He might be able to run it, but he just didn't do it. He's not experienced in it, I should say. Another knack at him is he played it safe a lot, often playing as a spy rather than coming downhill to try and make a big play, which is why he really didn't have that many tackles for a loss in his career. The most tackles for a loss he got in a season was 4, and that was in the 2020 season. Speaking of stat production, teams may worry about his production in terms of sacks, interceptions, and forced fumbles and fumble recoveries, as he really didn't rack up that many, ending his career with 6 of all of those combined in his 4 years at Georgia. So that was a little bit disappointing. But overall, with Rice, most mock drafts have him going in the 3rd round. Some have him going as early in the 2nd, and a few have him falling into the 4th round. Personally, I believe Monty Rice is a 2nd rounder. The worries about his coverage abilities to me are overblown, and he just has really good instincts that remind me of Darius Leonard. And while he doesn't have Leonard's size, he is slightly faster, as Leonard ran a 4.7, which honestly that surprised me. I looked at Darius Leonard. I didn't remember him running that slow. And Rice ran a 4.57 on his pro day. Don't get me wrong, Rice is an immediate starter for anybody. He does have some work to do on his coverage skills, and teams that are man-oriented are likely to turn away, which is why I could totally see him falling into the 3rd round. But I think there's a lot of good stuff to work with, and I think Rice can develop into a 3-down linebacker. While in the meantime, he can play in special teams. I think the special teams really pushes him into the 2nd round because even if you're developing him, he can contribute. I watched his 2018 and 2019 highlights. I watched versus Auburn in 2020. I watched versus Notre Dame in 2019. And I watched the Georgia defense versus Tennessee in 2020. I also started watching the Georgia defense versus Kentucky in 2020. But I think he was hurt for that game. I think he was hurt by then, and he wasn't playing. Oh, no, he was coming in and out because he was injured. He came back. The announcer said, oh, look, there's Monty Rice, and then he, left. So I got to see, one play in that game, but, So that was my last prospect in Monty Rice. Who is your last prospect?
Going to wrap things up today talking about Tony Fields II from West Virginia and Arizona, a graduate transfer senior, former All-State first-team selection at linebacker and All-Sunset League in high school. Was a freshman All-American selection by ESPN and 24/7 Sports, and racked up a bunch of different numbers. Started 46 games over his college career. Kind of wild to think about. And racked up over 370 tackles. Let's get right into the traits. Football IQ, fine. I thought he struggled too often in reading plays, had a tough time finding a spot in zone coverage, but he did a good job of finding the football. And for an undersized player, that's easier said than done. So he gets a B. Tackling, he made his fair share of tackles, and he does a good job of finding the football, but he missed a lot of tackles too. And the numbers are the numbers. He had a third fewer missed tackles last season, 8 from 23. So comparatively from 2019 to 2020. So there are signs of improvement there, but he gets a B- for that. His block shedding, not great. This is an obvious issue because of his size and his play strength, but shedding blocks has been a problem for him. Might be obvious, but the things he struggles with are the bigger linemen. If he can slip by them, that's great, but when he doesn't, he finds himself on the turf more often than he should, so he gets a C for that. Competitive toughness and play strength. Look, I don't think anyone's going to question his toughness given the fact that he's taking on these linemen standing at just 6'1" and 220 pounds. He's built more like a defensive back than a linebacker. So the fact that he's taking on these guys is pretty impressive to see. And play strength, again, is going to be a big issue because even if he bulks up, he's always going to have a size disadvantage in either coverage or run defense or pass rushing assignments. So he gets a C there. Lateral mobility, I felt like it was deceptively strong. Not flashy, but he's a good athlete. And shifty in traffic to get around players and other traffic. Similar to other prospects, he's not the top-level athlete, but there's something really good to work with here, I think, so I gave him an A-. Coverage skills, there's not much here. Athletic profile would lead one to believe that there's good coverage here, but that's just really not the case. He feels lost back there. He gets a C. Gap shooting ability is a B+. He's shifty. He can get through small spaces. If he can commit a little sooner, he'll be really dangerous there. His feet and change of direction skills. Good footwork, I feel like. Rushed on the edge on occasion and showed good footwork and bend there. Change of direction skills were good, and I thought a big reason why he stuck out as a good athlete on tape, so I gave him a B. His pursuit and motor. Pursuit angles were really good. Showed why he was able to track down so many football ball carriers in his career. And his motor was pretty good. I don't think I ever saw him giving up on a play, so I gave him a B+. Blitzing. His athleticism really helps him in this regard to make plays in the backfield. I was hoping to see more of it. He's a decent blitzer, not a great blitzer, though. The fact that he can rush off the edge, though, is nice to see, and that's something that he occasionally was able to get to the quarterback with as well. He gets a B+ there. So overall, Tony Fields the second, similar to most of the other prospects I've looked at today, a good athletic profile, a lot of collegiate production and experience to back up his speed and agility. And on one hand, those two things make him an attractive option for an NFL team looking for depth, but on the other hand, he's really undersized, and he comes with the struggles that undersized linebackers have, like not being able to get off blocks, not being strong enough. It's a problem that he's probably going to deal with throughout his entire NFL career. And he never really developed the way that scouts had kind of hoped that he would. I think he could be a good depth piece, but worst case scenario, he could be a special teams contributor. Vince Williams was once undersized and had a good career to this point, so maybe he has a chance too. I think he's a day 3 pick, maybe an earlier day 3 selection than a guy like Riley Cole, so maybe like a 4th or 5th round type of selection. So of the 8 guys we looked at, Austin, tell me about who was your favorite in terms of your opinion for how they'd fit with the Steelers, and how do you rank them after your top prospect?
So the way I rank them is number 1 is Monty Rice. If Rice falls to the Steelers on the 3rd round, I think that would be great. The 4th round would be insane, but honestly, Rice is deserving of the 2nd round grade I gave him. Honestly, I don't know how I'd feel about the Steelers going inside linebacker round 2, but if it was for someone, if they said, I want an inside linebacker, which there should be a lot of talent in round 2, I want it to be that. It is a guy to watch. Like I said, it's a guy to really look out for. The big guns were there at Georgia's Pro Day, so it's someone to look for. Number 2, I have Chaz Serrat. I love his potential. He kept getting better and better. Kind of the best linebacker I looked at the NFL level, if he did at the next level. All he really needs for me to like him more is to add some more lower body strength. He has the arms, just that. The leg strength and more experience that he needs, I think. I think that's literally it, and he could be a great linebacker. He already would be a perfect counter for Lamar Jackson. I didn't really mention it, but one of his best abilities was him spying mobile quarterbacks. He was excellent at not letting them get out, which would be amazing for the AFC North. So, see, it's almost like 1A and 1B, Chaz. It's just really... It feels like it's more likely he's a 2nd rounder and Rice is a 3rd rounder, so I think that's value is why he came in 2nd to Monty Rice, but a very good player. I'd be ecstatic if he fell into the 3rd round. I think that would be a really, really good selection because of his skills really help the Steelers in their division. For 3rd, Jamin Davis. Davis really just didn't pass the eye test. I don't know what it was, but I felt like his tape just wasn't very interesting and or great for the projections he's getting. I feel like that happens sometimes where I just have expectations and then they fall short and then I'm like, wow, I really don't like this player. But it's just, I don't like it for the projection. I view him as a 3rd best inside linebacker in this class, and instead I'm projecting him as a 1st rounder, and honestly, I just feel like I'd prefer Rice or Serrat in the 2nd round over him still. Like, if all 3 are there, I don't want Jamin Davis, even though people have him as graded higher. It's just, he needs some work, and but as a 3rd rounder, I wouldn't mind Jamin Davis, though. It's just kind of like, it's like Terrell Edmonds. It's like, it feels like it might be reaching if you go earlier than that. And I mean, it might be worth it in the end, but it just doesn't feel good in the time. At least KJ Britt left, and it's really because of his projections. Every I've seen going was between rounds 3 and 5. I haven't even seen someone say 6 yet. And for me, that is just unacceptable for a guy that appears so raw in a dying position. Not many teams are looking for a thumper anymore. And if he goes in the 7th round like I projected, I'd like him more than Jamin Davis. I would move up a slot if he goes up in the 7th round like I. It's just where Britt's value is considered now, I wouldn't touch him. He's not better than where Vince Williams was coming out, and Vince went in the 6th. So I just can't justify it. I mean, honestly, the Steelers might go after him because of what he's like, because like Vince Williams, but I just, if it's anywhere between the value that he's at now, I just don't personally like it. How do you rank your prospects?
All right, starting at the bottom, I'm going to go with Zavin Collins. Look, he's an excellent athlete. Great size, great versatility, good experience. He can play as an edge rusher or linebacker. Unfortunately, I mentioned that his career is going to be scheme dependent and going to be dependent on where he goes. I don't think he fits in with the Steelers that well based on what they run and what they need. I actually really like what he has to offer as an edge defender, and if a team is drafting him, I'd want him to be an inside linebacker that also occasionally is a rotational edge rusher, and I just don't see why the Steelers would do that. If he's somehow there in the 2nd round when they pick, I'd take him, but not before then. Riley Cole I have next. He has some injury concerns, and he's not strong enough, and he's not overly athletic. He can't get off blocks. I don't think he's a serious option to be a defensive starter, but I think that he could be a good special teams contributor for the following years to come. A Robert Spillane replacement, if you will, who was a replacement for Tyler Matakevich. So Cole could be an option to continue that trend. Second, I have Tony Fields the second. The concerns about his size don't really have me concerned because in today's NFL, a lot of it is played in space. Even though he struggled to disengage from blocks and you'd hope that he can bulk up a bit more, I feel more comfortable with a guy like that in today's NFL than I do the next John Bostic or a player of that mold. So I wouldn't hate Tony Fields in day 3. And my favorite prospect, as wild as it is to say regarding how just insanely, I hate to drag on the guy, but how just out to lunch he was on some of these plays. He was a really good athlete with a lot of experience and a lot of tackles in college. At worst, he should be a good special teamer, and you'd only have to take a day 3 pick on him, I think. And I think that there is some upside to him potentially being a long-term solution inside linebacker. There's no chance, there's no guarantee it'll work, but you'll have a chance. And I know the Steelers' track record lately with guys that are not high football IQ players not working out, but still, a late-round selection, I think it's not the worst thing in the world to go with. I mean, he can't be that bad at it going forward, can he? I mean, can he really be that clueless?
Maybe.
Okay, we'll just don't listen to me then. I don't know what I'm talking about, I guess.
Oh man.
All right, so we'll be back tomorrow talking specialists and NFL free agency, mostly free agency, because there's not much to talk about with long snappers.
No, they snap ball. They if they're in the draft, they probably do it good enough. They probably do it pretty good.
I had compiled a list of 3 long snappers because I was trying so hard to find names of guys that were going to be available, because that's hard in of itself. And then after getting ready to type up the bio, I realized that he had gone back to school. So that left us with just 2. So hopefully no one will go back to school by the end of tomorrow. So that sounded bad. We're going to end things right there. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. We'll be back tomorrow talking specialists and NFL free agency. If you have any questions about the show, please feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com and check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. You can find our episodes posted on YouTube and SoundCloud under the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Until tomorrow, Austin, have a great night. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on the Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.